We're going to take a pouring of wine break. Okay.
During our sex and wine conversation.
Sex and wine. Gotta love it. All right. How often do you want to have sex or think one should be having sex?
Every day.
Okay.
All the time.
Morning, noon, and evening. It's kind of like a meal.
Yeah, like why not?
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right.
But for real.
But for real?
Yeah.
I talk to men more about this than women, particularly in some of the men's work that I do. This feeling of like we don't have sex enough. We don't have intimacy in our life, and there's certainly a conflation of intimacy and sex, which I think is an interesting topic, and I think we can get there in a minute. But we don't have enough, and or my wife doesn't want to anymore, or we barely have any sex, or whatever. And I feel like that becomes problematic because there is, but one thing I was thinking the other day when I was talking to someone about this is that if you have a partner who doesn't want to have sex, the problem is not that your partner doesn't want to have sex. That's a symptom. There's another problem. There's something else going on. And what is it? So, and I think that's why, and of course there's ebbs and flows, even for us, when you travel and you have a lot more, and there's more stress, sometimes we have less sex. Sometimes when, and then it goes up and down, right? In general, we're pretty consistent. Like if you're not on your period, it's probably every other day-ish.
Really?
Pretty close, right? I think it's more or less.
I thought it's like 3 to 4 times. Yeah,
that's every other day.
Yeah, that's every other day.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're telling the world that how many times we usually have sex in a week.
Yeah, but sometimes we do more than that. Early on.
Oh my God, we had so much sex.
Like the first few months it's a good thing neither of us had jobs.
Yeah.
At that time I had a contract come to an end and I hadn't started a new job. I didn't have any projects really. I was in the middle of a very long-term project, so we both had time.
Yeah, and I had taken a break from school to build my business and I was working from home, and when you start a business, you don't know what you're doing, so you have sex.
Yeah, right. And and you could always then you could actually have sex like a meal because you're like, no, I'm just going to go back to work.
I know.
In the living room, then I'm going to go back in the bedroom. So.
Yeah, but I think like that was like our first 6 months, and then it got
a little bit more realistic.
Now it feels like normal.
Yeah.
I don't know what normal is, but
yeah, I don't either. But
normal for us.
Obviously, when you have kids, you can always come up with a reason why, like you get tired. There are things, but I feel like it does need to be a priority. How often? Like, I don't know. Actually, I have a close friend of mine who we're fairly open about this kind of stuff with. She was, also it's kind of like us, and even, with young children, it certainly dipped a bit. But that actually became a priority in their lives to bring it, to actually bring it back because of that, that intimacy and closeness. And I think one thing is that if you're having it less, like I notice one thing is that sometimes we've just like had a bad week or something, right? And then we have sex, and sometimes the sex feels a little bit like, it just didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel quite right.
Yeah, I can't, but I would rather not have sex when we're like not in good terms. Like, to me, it just feels like I'm using sex to get closer to you. And I just like cleaning up what we're fighting about or what we're going through before we have sex.
Right. I agree with that. And therefore, that's what I was talking about before, where you talk about like the problem or the symptom. And not having sex as a symptom of another problem is like, I need to deal with this other thing because I don't feel that comfortable. So I'm going to put that off. And then you put off, but then the sex doesn't feel good. And now if the sex doesn't feel good, you don't want to have it very often. And it becomes like, now there's something buried deep underneath. And
yeah, I remember a time like when I was struggling and we were just like, let's have sex because we both can't sleep. And then we were like, I remember we looked at each other and we were like, are we using sex for the wrong reasons? Mm-hmm. Because we both can't sleep. And that needed to be a conversation about, are we using sex as stress?
As a stress reliever.
Yeah.
Instead of as part of our, just part of our intimacy.
Intimacy, yeah, as a couple. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I feel like if we weren't having sex at least a couple times a week as like an average, I would say, I feel like we need to sit down and really be honest, like, why not?
But don't you think, like, now we're in our we're like, what, 3.5 years into a relationship? Do you think, like, when we're like, how many times do you think we're going to be having sex when we're like together for 10 years? Do you think that's going to change?
I'm sure the ebbs and flows, like the ebb might be a little bit longer, but like I said, if it's much less than twice per week, if it's definitely less than once per week, even like 10 years from now, like I feel like there's a conversation that needs to be had. Like, why not? And there might be some good reasons, and we might discover something. We're younger now, and I don't know. You know, everyone has their own sort of flows or what's important to them. But I feel like if we're not, it's at least like to be conscious of it and say, let's have this conversation. Why not? Like, is this something that we both feel right? Is there some reason why we're not as into it as we used to be? And it might just be, yeah, I'm just like old and I just don't care anymore.
You know, a friend of mine from Kenya told me, like, when you're in your 30s, I was in my 20s, and I was just like, I don't know, like, sex wasn't that great. And she was like, when you're in your 30s, sex is going to be amazing. And I kid you not, sex in your 30s is way more amazing than sex in your 20s. And I'm just wondering, women in your 40s, is this the trend? Like, sex?
If so.
If so.
Like, bring 40.
I'm like, woo, I'm 35 now, but I'm like, I can't wait to be 40, and like, I can't wait to be 50.
Yeah. Like, when I get to be 100 years old.
I'm going to be having like the greatest sex of, I don't know.
I think as I've gotten older, I think it's gotten better. For sure. Yeah. It's, you know, because there's just also more like consciousness of my own body. And I actually have had time to learn things about my body and learn about, you know, channeling sexual energy and things like that. And so
all those 20-year-olds listening to us, it's going to get better.
It gets so much better. My goodness. Wow.
And women in your 40s and 50s, please, if you're watching this, let me know.
So we talked about one thing there as we kind of come to a close here is sex and intimacy. Like, how do you define those two things? Are they the same? Are they different? How do they overlap?
I don't think they're the same. I think you can have sex without intimacy. And I think you can have intimacy without sex.
I agree. Which is interesting. I totally agree.
I've had sex.
That's not intimate.
No,
and you
at
have
all.
Intimate moments that are not sexual.
Correct.
Or not having sex, either way.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. But one thing that I've heard, and I don't know if this is like a conversation, if it's a vernacular thing, but I've heard, I've dealt with men who, when they're talking about like, I just want to be intimate with my wife, and actually what they're saying is I want to have sex. So those two things get conflated. Why do those two things get conflated, do you think?
I think that intimacy leads to sex. And so sometimes I feel like people jump into, like, I think that's why you go on a dinner date and that's intimate. Like, you don't go in like, when I think about like the way we think about, we're in like the pandemic, like, but one thing that we've done or we did was like have dinner at home, like just a date night, the two of us we'd dress up nice, put on shoes, and then head to the dining table.
Like tonight, we dressed up nice, we poured wine, and we're
going nowhere.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that we've done that on and off for a couple months. And I think what we're trying to do at that point, we could also just go into the bedroom and have sex, but I think what we're trying to do is build some intimacy and special moments before we have sex.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I find that it's interesting that those two things get conflated very often. And I don't know if that's also if sometimes like men use that word because like wanting sex is almost like so stereotypical that that using that word intimacy becomes a way of saying it's more than just sex. Like I want to be intimate with my wife. May be saying I want to have sex with my wife. But the other thing is that I actually also want to be intimate with my wife. And maybe if we were intimate, like we would actually have sex and I wouldn't have to want sex anymore. Like, correct. Because I would get it.
Because I feel like you can have I have intimate relationship with my friends, and what that means to me is like when I have really close women friend, and I have intimate relationships with them because it's like, it's special. it's a one-on-one and it's not sexual at all. You know, it's just like we get to have those intimate conversation. And I think that that's what normally what happens is like you have intimate conversation with your partner that makes you become really close, and then it leads to sex.
Yeah. And I think that kind of tying this back up and going back to the beginning, one of the things that was so amazing for us at the beginning of our relationship was that intimacy, we had intimacy and a lot of deep, like insane intimacy without having sex.
Yeah, like I think about it. We spent an entire month every day for hours talking
and we were
about what we
like
were
4 days a
shameful
week.
about, what we were regretted, like what, you know.
Mistakes we had made in the past.
Yeah, like we both had relationships that have failed. Like we built this like intense, really intense intimacy without having sex.
And you did something that was kind of amazing.
What did I do?
First, like before I would say it was probably 2 days before we actually really were like, now we're dating.
Yeah.
You knew that I'd been divorced, and it was kind of the same, right? And the one thing that you like, we had gone out to eat and you came back and you said, okay, what did you do? You know,
I
and it was just
that.
like, it was just very direct. Like, I want to know. But it wasn't like this judgmental, like, you got to tell me. It's just like, let's just be honest with me. And then you shared some of your stories, you know, and you're like, I know that you weren't perfect. And you, like, what was your part in it, I think is even what you said. You know, it was not that it's my fault. It's not that it's her fault. It's nobody's fault. But we each have a part in a relationship that
ended up in divorce.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's like, oh, okay. Like, and then I could just like share, and you just didn't, and then you weren't even judgmental. And then as you know, and that was just kind of wonderful. And then because of that, because you didn't have judgment over it, then I actually didn't feel like I had to hide anything from you. And over time, there are some things in my life that I carried a lot of shame around that like I hate talking about. I don't want to talk to anybody about, you know, but that I was like, I can share it with you because my mistakes, you're not going to hate me for my mistakes. You're not going to love me less. And all that intimacy existed before sex. And so that kind of deep trust came into the sex as opposed to kind of like having sex and then, oh, but now I want it. And I think that's one of the things that Robert Glover talked about is like, I've got it. I don't want to mess this up. So now I got to kind of like keep doing what I think she wants me to do. So I keep getting it as opposed to this woman loves me. Like we are within like immediately, like this person loves me and I can tell her all of these mistakes. I can be just authentic. You know, it was just that. And I didn't have to worry about being a certain way to get laid because I wasn't getting laid anyways.
Yeah, so you could be yourself.
So it didn't matter. And then I could be fully authentic and learn that you were going to love me, warts and all of my flaws. And then, it wasn't like I had to be something else to have sex with you. I could just be me.
Yeah. And right before we wrap up, I'm just I just remembered that one of the things that during that month, I think we promised each other that whatever was going to be said, like our shame, the things that we both regret, like everything was going to be on the table and we were never going to use what was said then to win arguments in the future or to like use it against. Because sometimes I found in my relationships is that I would tell the guys that I was dating something that I was struggling with or something that was like really difficult. And then what happened was like, in a future conversation or in a future fight, they'll pull that because they knew it was it would hurt and it was painful, which is a fucked up move, but people do it all the time. And so one of the things that we agreed as a couple was not to do that. And because we talked about it, I have done it, you know, like we have both done it at some point, and then we were like, that is not gonna fly in this relationship.
Yep. Right.
You know.
And being able to take responsibility for that. But that's actually a great topic, and I think that might be for another episode.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thank you for joining us for Sex and Wine. Cheers. We hope you've enjoyed. If you have, make sure you subscribe on our YouTube page, subscribe to our podcast. And also, We have a Facebook group. It's the Interracial Couples. You can find us, and we'll make sure to link that in our show notes. So you can find us there as Interracial Couples. We have a way to be there for each other, support each other, and revel in all of our shared joys and triumphs, as well as offer support and guidance in some of the challenges.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Until then, may your wine be legendary
and take you to the bedroom.
All right, see you next time.
Cheers, bye.